Right, everybody, welcome along to this one. This is David Attenborough reading number 11. They have managed to have an encounter with a sloth in the last bit, and now we are off looking for snakes, as the title of the chapter would suggest. The next morning, we set off for Wailamepu with Kenneth and King George. Those are the two locals. The outboard engine was working perfectly, and in 2 hours we reached the mouth of the Kaku River. After 15 minutes' journey up the Kaku, we saw a path running up the riverbank into the forest. At its foot, by a muddy landing, were moored several canoes. We stopped our engine, disembarked, and walked up the path to the village. They're also about to do some interviewing of the locals as well, which is why they're here. Scattered around a sandy clearing were 8 rectangular ridge-roofed huts raised on short stilts. Their walls and floors were of bark, and they were thatched with palm leaves. Women, some in worn cotton frocks, others wearing only the traditional bead apron around their loins, stood at the doors of the houses and watched us. Scraggy chickens and mangy dogs wandered in and out of the huts, and tiny lizards skittered from beneath our feet as we went. Kenneth led us up to an old, genial man sitting in the sun on the steps of his house. He was naked except for a pair of tattered, heavily patched shorts which had once been khaki. "This headman," said Kenneth as he introduced us. The headman spoke no English, but through Kenneth he welcomed us and suggested we should stay in the derelict hut at the far end of the village, which was used as a church when the missionary came to the district. Meanwhile, King George had enlisted the aid of some village boys, and between them they had brought all of our baggage from the boat and laid it in a pile near the church. We walked back up the river with Kenneth and King George. Kenneth wrestled with the outboard engine. At last it started, and the boat surged away from the bank. "I come back 1 week's time," yelled Kenneth above the roar of the engine as he disappeared downriver. I mean, I'd be pretty scared if you were just left with a load of people who seem nice, but you don't even know who they are. Got a week, off you go, bye. Most of that day we spent in unpacking our gear and constructing a little kitchen outside the hut. Later we wandered about the village, endeavouring not to appear too inquisitive too early, for it seemed hardly polite to start peering into huts and taking photographs until we got to know the villagers. We soon discovered Clarence, a cheerful man in his early 20s, sitting in his hammock, busy weaving an elaborate piece of basket work. Now Clarence was somebody, they said, who was meant to be speaking English. He welcomed us with genuine sincerity, but made it clear that at that moment he was too busy to do more than exchange a few words. We returned to the church in the late afternoon and began thinking of making a meal. Clarence appeared at the door. "Good night," he said with an expansive smile. "Good night," we replied, having been forewarned that this was the normal evening greeting. "I bring you these things," he said, putting down 3 large pineapples on the floor. He sat down and settled himself comfortably in the doorway, his back against the doorpost. "You come from long way?" We admitted that we did. "And why you come here?" "Our people far, far away across the sea do not know anything about the Akawea on the Mazaruni. We bring kinds of machines to take pictures and sounds so that we can show our people how you make cassava bread and woodskin canoes and all things like that." Clarence looked incredulous, like he couldn't believe it. "You think anyone far away wish to know these things?" "Yes, for sure." "Well, the people here will show you, if you really wish," said Clarence, still slightly doubtful. "But please, you show me all these things you bring." Charles produced the camera, and Clarence peered down the viewfinder with delight. I demonstrated the tape recorder. This was an even greater success. Can you imagine, like somebody who's never encountered any forms of these technologies before? "These fine things," said Clarence, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "There is one thing we come for," I said. "We wish to find all kinds of animals, birds, snakes, every kind of thing we want." "Aha," said Clarence. "King George told me about one man you leave bottom side at Camarang who able to catch snakes and get no fear at all. That true ting, that King George say?" "Yes," I replied. "My friend, he catch all things." "You catch snakes too?" inquired Clarence. "Well, yes," I replied modestly, anxious not to let pass this chance of gratuitous prestige. Clarence pressed the matter. "Even the kind that bite bad?" Yes," I said, rather uncomfortably, hoping that I would not be drawn into too deep a discussion about the matter. The fact was that whenever snakes appeared, Jack, as curator of reptiles, was the person ex officio who caught them. Remember, Jack is somebody who works for London Zoo, so he's quite good at working with animals, and that's part of their mission here, is to film and also take back animals. My achievements had been limited to once picking up a very small, timid, non-poisonous python in Africa. There was a long pause. "Well, good night," said Clarence brightly, and he disappeared. Charles and I settled down to our meal of tinned sardines, followed by one of the pineapples which Clarence had brought us. Darkness fell, and we climbed into our hammocks and prepared for sleep. We were wakened by a loud "Good night!" I looked up and found Clarence with the entire population of the village standing around the door of the hut. "You tell these people what you tell me," demanded Clarence. We got up, repeated our stories, showed the light of the paraffin lamp in the camera viewfinder, and played the recorder. "We'll sing now," announced Clarence, organising the rest of the villagers into an orderly group. Without the least trace of enthusiasm, they chanted a long dirge in which I thought I could detect the word Hallelujah. I remembered what Bill told me. "Why you sing Hallelujah chant? I thought this be Adventist village." "We all Adventists," explained Clarence airily, "and sometimes we all sing Adventist song, but when we really happy," he added, leaning forward conspiratorially, "we sing Hallelujah." He brightened. "Now we sing Adventist song because you asked for it." I recorded the chant, and when it was finished I played it back to the villagers on a small speaker. They were entranced, and Clarence insisted now that each member should perform a solo. Some sang guttural dirges, and one man produced a flute made from the shin bone of a deer, on which he played a simple tune. This lengthy concert slightly embarrassed us, for we only had a limited number of tapes, and our machine, being a small lightweight battery-operated model, did not carry an erasing device. If I recorded everything, I might waste all my valuable tapes on these relatively uninteresting party pieces, and when I heard genuine spontaneous material, there would be no tapes left. So I tried to record the minimum of each performance necessary to convince each singer that justice had been done to him. After an hour and a half, the music came to an end, and the villagers sat round the hut chattering in Akawao, figuring out the equipment and clothes and laughing among themselves. We could not join in the conversation, and Clarence was involved in a heated discussion with another man outside the hut. We sat, ignored, wondering what the polite thing to do, and resigning ourselves to getting no sleep that night. Clarence stuck his head in the door. "Good night," he said, beaming. "Good night," we replied, and all 20 of our guests, without a word, got to their feet and trooped out into the night. And that is the end of that chapter. Now, no snakes, but I think the snakes are certainly coming in the next one, because I can see some pictures coming up. So thanks for joining us. It's a short one today, but hopefully you found it useful, or enjoyable, I should say, rather than useful. And join me again for part 12 very soon. Bye-bye.